Okay, so hi guys, let's continue with our 8th and 9th lesson on congruence and SSSESESES triangle congruence, postulates and theorems, and how to make logical statements. So for this one, state the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive of the statement. The square is a rectangle. Determine the truth or falsity of each and check the logical equivalence of the statement and its contrapositive and of the converse and the inverse. So first, let's write our statement. Okay, so our statement is square is a rectangle. Now, what is the converse? What is the converse of the statement? In the converse, the hypothesis comes first. It's followed by the conclusion comes first, then it's followed by the hypothesis of the original statement. Okay, so therefore for this one, we can say a figure that is a rectangle is a square. Now, for this one, a square is a rectangle. We know the truth value of this one. This is true. But for the second one, try to look closely. A figure that is a rectangle is a square. So, not all rectangles are squares. There are one example of a rectangle would be not all rectangles are squares, right? Because that would violate the first one. So that means this is false. Okay? And then we have the inverse of the statement. So let's try to form the inverse of the statement. So we're going to negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion. Let's check whether it's true. A figure that is not square is not a rectangle. Okay, so let's try to analyze this one. A figure that is not a square is not a rectangle. Now we know just by saying that's already false, because not all figures that are not squares can be not a rectangle. So they could be other figures as well. Maybe they could be a triangle. Okay, so a figure that could be not a square. Okay, so it could be not rectangle. So what example would that be? Okay, so a rectangle. A rectangle is directly related to a parallelogram. Okay, so a square. Okay, so one example of this would be a parallelogram. A figure that is not a square, which is a parallelogram, is not a rectangle. So a parallelogram is not a square, but it could be a rectangle because it has congruent parallel sides, opposite sides. But a rectangle has right angles that are congruent to each other. What other shapes could there be? A figure that is not a square is not a rectangle. Okay, so we know that this is false because we cannot generalize all not squares being not rectangles. Okay, then we have the contrapositive for this one. Okay, so what's the contrapositive of our statement? Again, we have to interchange the conclusion and the hypothesis, and then we have to negate them. Okay, so for this one, a figure that is not a rectangle is not square. Now, from this statement, we can say that this is true. This is true. Why is it true? A figure that is not a rectangle is not a square. So since rectangles are more general and squares are a bit more specific, therefore if the premise is already true that this figure is not a rectangle, therefore it follows that it's also not a square, since a square is under the family of rectangles. It's a more specific type of rectangle. Whereas for the inverse, we cannot say that a figure that is not a square is not a rectangle, because a square, that's the specific part, and the rectangle is the much more general for that problem. So for this one, the true statements are the original and the contrapositive. And always remember that the contrapositive, okay, so it has specific properties that makes it true. And the false statements are the converse and the inverse of the original statement. The converse and the inverse of the original. And that's how we can solve this problem.